Today I'm answering your questions that were submitted to me on the Guns of the West Facebook page. I'm Dustin and you're watching Guns of the West. Well, I recently posted on the Guns of the West Facebook page that I thought it would be fun to do a video like this, and I'm looking here at the comments and there were some questions left, so we're going to go through them together. Now, if you have questions, I would love to do more of these, especially because it's winter and harder to get out and do the actual shooting videos. So leave a comment on this video and I'll be going through those as well so that we can do this another time, maybe multiple times going forward. So let's just go through these questions I've got here on the iPad on the Facebook post. The first one comes from Guy. He writes, have you done a video on shooting the Uberti 1850 carbine revolver using a cartridge conversion cylinder yet? That would be good. Now, Uberti 1850 carbine, I'm not sure what he's referring to there unless he means their copy of the Remington 1858 carbine, Uberti calls it. And if so, the answer is yes. I've done it with loose powder and ball. I've also done it with the conversion cylinder in 45 Colt. And I'll put a link in the description down below of the one with the conversion cylinder. That was actually a lot of fun to do. Joshua writes, I recently got a percussion cap maker. It's not a perfect solution, but it works. That one is more of a statement than a question. I guess we could make a question out of that. Maybe the question could be, have I used the percussion cap makers? I get asked that a lot in emails in the past, and the answer is I have not. I've never needed to. I know the Remington number 10 caps are pretty scarce right now, and those are the best ones for the cap and ball revolvers. But thankfully, before things got crazy and before they got scarce, I had a good supply that I'm still working through, and hopefully that will last me until they're easy to find again. And if not, I may be trying out percussion cap makers. Let's see, Donald writes, talk about the proper way to load them, meaning cap and ball revolvers, the correct powder charge, and round ball size. What's the best caps to use? What are the differences in, say, an original 1851 compared to the Italian models? Okay, that one's a lot to unpack, so let's go through that. We'll break it up into separate questions. So, proper way to load them. If you watch, I'm not going to do it here in the studio, but if you watch pretty much any of my revolver videos, you'll see how I do that. But basically the order is you put the powder charge in the chamber, then you can go a couple different ways. You can put a lubricated felt wad on top of the powder and then your projectile. Or the way I typically prefer to do it is put the projectile directly on the powder and then just smear some bullet lube on top of that. Whether you're using the wad or the lube, you're getting the same purpose. It gets left in the rifling. It helps keep the fouling from hardening so that you don't lose the effect of the rifling and ruin your accuracy. A lot of people think that the wad or the grease is to prevent chain fires. I definitely think as a last line of defense it can help with that, but that's not really what it's for. Now, last step for loading is going to be your percussion cap. And the reason that's the last step, a couple of things. One is safety. If you've got the cap on there, then that chamber is primed and something goes wrong, potentially you could have an accidental or negligent discharge. The other reason is if you put the cap on first and then you put a ball or a bullet in and you press it down, you're compressing the air in the chamber, which normally could escape through the flash hole, but now what it's going to probably do is pop the cap off of the nipple. Might not come all the way off because it's going to be wedged between the cylinder and the frame, but it can at least pop loose and then you might have them falling off, which then could lead to a chain fire. So powder, and then either ball and then lube, or wad and then ball, then put your cap on. And again, watch any of my videos to see that. The next part of that, the proper powder charge. Honestly, whatever shoots best in your gun. The thing you want to avoid is having too little, because as the ball goes down into the chamber, you want to make sure it contacts the powder. Otherwise, you've got a space of just some empty air. And when the black powder explodes in that, it can build up higher pressures than normal. Now, I think a lot of people misunderstand what that means. I'm not saying the gun is likely to explode in your hand or anything. I think it would take a lot more explosive than that to cause that to happen. But it's one of those things where the damage can be cumulative. If you're having higher pressure than the gun should take, then you do that over a prolonged period of time, and maybe pretty soon parts don't fit right and things like that, and things need to be replaced or just not used anymore at all. So don't put too little. But beyond that, I mean, I've done a video where I filled chambers all the way to the top, flush with the end of the cylinder, and then mashed it down with a ball. It works fine. Black powder's not like smokeless. You can't really overdo it in these small chambers. So experiment, making sure you're starting with something that fills the space, and then experiment to find your best accuracy and consistency. Let's see, the next part of his was the correct round ball size. Now this is another thing that you need to experiment with, because I've noticed the guns are not always machined exactly the same. So you want to experiment. What you're looking for, the general rule is, as the ball pushes into the chamber, it should shave off a ring of lead. It shouldn't be too hard to push it in there and do that, but you want to see that ring just so that you know it's slightly oversized and therefore sealing the chamber. As a general rule, the 36s like the .375 balls and the 44s like the .454. Again, general rule. I know they don't all do that. And then the next part of his best caps to use, as I mentioned before, Remington number 10s, if you can find them. Generally, those will be the best. My next go-to, if I can't find those, is CCI number 11. Those two caps, the internal diameter is the same, so theoretically they both work interchangeably. The CCI number 11 is a little shorter, so I found, if anything, it may just back off under recoil. So just check as you're shooting, keep an eye, make sure your caps aren't backing off. Next, he also asked in this one, what are the differences in, say, an original 1851 compared to the Italian models? Biggest things that I notice, I think, are going to be things like the plunger that pushes the ball down. Uberti generally gets it right. Pieta has them shaped for round ball only, at least generally they do. So as long as you're shooting round balls, that's fine, but if you're shooting a conical bullet, you may mash up the end of the bullet a little bit. Another thing, as far as a difference, sometimes is the loading port, where you actually put the ball in and rotate it under the barrel and the cylinder. Sometimes those are a little smaller or a little bigger than the originals, which can be an issue if you're trying to load paper cartridges or something. The only one I can think of, though, that really needs to be modified much for that is the 1860 Army, if you're interested in shooting paper cartridges, but that's not hard to do. All right, moving on. Donald, same Donald, asks, which would be a better choice, 1860 Army or the Remington new model Army? When I laugh, I mean no offense, Donald, that's a good question, but I think it's funny because whatever I say, I'm going to get hated for. It's like Chevy versus Ford or any other big rivalry, Colt versus Remington. Now, if you're asking me just my opinion, I go with Colt every single time. I love the Remingtons. I would say the upside of the Remington, they do tend to shoot point of aim, or at least very close. Colts shoot very high. But if you get used to that and you learn your gun, the fact that it shoots high doesn't really stop me, or it doesn't really stop most people. A lot of people think the Remington is a lot stronger because it has that frame that goes up over the cylinder all the way around instead of just having the cylinder on an arbor. I mean, I don't know that you could load the Colts hot enough for that to be a problem, unless maybe it's a brass frame, maybe over time. But the Colts, you have to understand the arbor that turns on, that's not like a little pin. It's a thick, heavy-duty piece of steel. It's very, very strong. For me, shooting comfort, I like the Colts, and I don't mind the fact that they shoot high. I just get used to it. And the looks of the gun. I think the Colts are just absolutely gorgeous. So, for me, between those two you named, Donald, 1860 Army. George writes, Pieta versus Uberti on quality control. That's another one that I might get hate for. Honestly, though, nowadays, I don't really see a whole lot of difference on them. For smoothness, maybe I'd say Uberti, their springs, at least in the guns that I've shot, tend to be a little bit lighter. Not light enough to be a problem, but light enough that they just feel liquid smooth on the action. The Pietas are smooth also, at least the ones I own. In fact, that one right there, that's not cap and ball, but it is a Pieta, and that is the smoothest action that I own. So it's not that Pietas aren't smooth. I do notice their hammer springs tend to be a little bit stiffer. As I've said before, Pieta does put the markings on the gun where Uberti hides them a little bit, but just overall quality control, it's getting to the point where anytime I get a new one from either company, I'm just blown away. I think they're fantastic and improving all the time. Jeff writes, that would be awesome. I just got an 1851 Navy and have a bunch of questions. I guess he's just saying awesome about the post. Lay them on me, Jeff. Put them in the comments on this video and I'll be glad to talk about them. David writes, how about why do Replica Navy revolvers get produced in the wrong caliber? Great question. What he's talking about is, for those that don't know, the 1851 Navy, the 1861 Navy, basically any of the navies, historically were 36 caliber, but they're available today in 44 from the Italian makers. I'm going to be soon, hopefully within a month, maybe two, be doing a video as I plan to acquire an 1851 Navy from Pietas in 44 caliber, just because I get questions about that gun all the time, loads for it and things like that. I don't necessarily... There was a reply on here that says they're not wrong to do that, and I could agree with that to a point. I believe, more than likely, there did exist an 1851 in 44 caliber, maybe more than one. You go back in history, and a lot of these guns were made in a lot of different calibers, just kind of experimenting around. And so I think it's very likely there was a 44 at some point, but I don't think that's why Pietas does it, and I don't think Uberti does it that I've seen, but Pietas does offer them. I think a big reason, it's nice if you only have to buy one projectile size to work in your Navy and say your 1860 Army. And I've heard, I don't do any reenacting, like Civil War reenacting or anything, but I've heard from people who do that it can be nice, again, for that reason of interchanging ammo in like a reenacting scenario. Not that you're using balls, not actually putting lead ball in there, but just to have 44, maybe you're putting a blank or something, it's nice to have it all the same. So I don't know. That's the reason Pietas offers it. I don't consider it wrong because, you know, we're shooting these guns in 2025. At this point, we're mostly just having fun with them. So shoot what you want. If you like it in 44, get it in 44. I'm getting one myself, as I said. Let's see. Arturo writes, is there any difference between 36 and 44 caliber in accuracy? That's an interesting question. And I would say, when you're shooting these cap and ball revolvers, it just in my own experience, generally no, because you're shooting, you know, generally again at pistol distances, and at those distances you can usually experiment your way through powder charges and things to get really tight accuracy with either one. Now, if you were to start extending the distance, 44 shoots a heavier projectile, so I think it stands to reason that you might be able to maintain accuracy a little farther with that, but I haven't really tested that. But again, at pistol distances, do some experimenting, and in my experience, I can get pretty accurate with both of them. And by pretty, I mean very accurate. Let's see. Steve asks, this is the last one on here, where can I get mine fixed? Who can I send it to if it's something I can't fix myself? I hate to say this, Steve, I don't have a great answer to that one. And that's because I've very seldom had anything break that needed to be fixed. And when it has, it's never been something that I haven't been able to take care of just by ordering a part or a couple of parts to fix it myself. That one on the wall actually has about that long of a carpenter finish nail in it. So you can get creative. That's actually what I use as the plunger that moves the hammer instead of a hand on that gun. But yeah, I've always just done it myself. So I guess what I would recommend, if it's beyond your skill or beyond what you're comfortable with, maybe take it to a local gun shop and see if they offer gunsmithing. And if they don't, they can probably point you to someone who does. Well, anyway, like I said, if you have other questions, leave them in the comments below on this video. I would love to get to them. This was kind of a fun thing to do. And again, something we can do on cold days when it's hard to get out in the desert and actually do some shooting. Well, please don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you can see more videos. And as always, if you look in the description, you'll see where to find me on social media, like Facebook and others, and where you can find all the great Guns of the West products. Thank you so much for watching.